Hello, Sparkleteers. Another day and another fast one pulled by Liana Kersner. So, what's new today? She has called me a malicious actor, and once again, she has um, gone ahead and tried to cast doubt on the chat logs themselves, perhaps in the most boomer way possible by maybe intentionally continuing to misunderstand how Telegram chat exports work by essentially saying that anyone who uses Telegram knows that Telegram essentially looks like a green background. I did rightfully so mock her in the last video because I'm sorry, she's been on this goddamn app for 6 years. She should know better. And to be honest, I think she does know better. She is not that incompetent with technology. Otherwise, she wouldn't be a gamer. But, this is part and parcel of the Liana Kersner circus. But this is part and parcel of the Liana Kersner routine, which is by now a very established pattern if you look at the evidence that is on the web page, right? I suddenly turned Australian there for a second. So I thought that I would show you once and for all where that screenshot comes in. So let me pull up my. There we go. So this is the folder where my chat extracts are. Notice the date of extraction, the 1st of October, right? And then these are all the files that Kirsten and I sent to each other over 6 years. And here's me proving to you with one of Lena's recordings.
Just press start on Christmas time this year. The reason.
Yeah. But in any case, let's go into the chat themselves. So see a whole bunch of documents there. The claim is on page 71. So we're going to open that. And there you see the URL on my browser, exactly that same page. And there it is, timestamps and everything. Now, Liana has said something absolutely ridiculous that Telegram chats are not left justified. Again, I really don't want to make fun of her, but this is just ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. You're seeing the export here. Last time I showed you exactly how this format is generated. At this point, she is being intentionally disingenuous. She is lying because she does not want to admit that these chats are authentic. Now, why would she want to do that? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons, right? For example, Liana is accusing these chats of being defamatory. Again, I'm sorry, defamation has a very, very specific definition, and part of it includes, well, you might say the core tenet of it includes the fact that they have to be false. It is not defamation if what I am saying is true. Now, of course, Liana has said that she has engaged legal counsel again. I don't know what she needs to do it again because isn't Mark Burry her lawyer? So why isn't Mr. Burry advising her on this? But I to put the sass aside for a moment. I'm going to say that I am perfectly fine with this course of events. If she does indeed decide to bring the situation to some legal form or another, I'm going to state, first of all, that we have nothing to hide. We have done nothing wrong and nothing illegal. And the information that I have here, which I have shown you, is true. It has not been vandalized, it has not been altered. And in fact, I would be more than happy to provide all of my chat logs to forensic experts, should that come to be the case, so they can authenticate the chats and they can see that the chats are not, in fact, adulterated, which would essentially verify that Liana Kirchner did indeed say what she said. In fact, I mean, I showed you some of the chat. I didn't go up a little bit further because that's Liana complaining about her husband yet again, and me complaining about my husband yet again. Like I said, this happened. Which brings me to the next section. Now, Liana has yet again tried to flip the script and said that I am essentially blaming her for being abused and not disclosing the abuse. So I want to talk about that very briefly. I did not make any explicit accusations of abuse when I was discussing her situation with Stephen. Rather, I was highlighting a concerning situation at home, which involved the mental health of one of the spouses of the team, which caused significant delays in that team member's output. I'm talking about Liana here. And if that sounded familiar, it's because that is the exact same language that she used to describe the situation in the cancellation video, but only speaking about me and my husband. And in the screenshots from her Discord server, which incidentally, these are not just screenshots, we have logs, entire folders of logs from Liana's Discord server that we can authenticate as true. So we're not making anything up here. Liana has portrayed the situation as being exclusively Asher's fault for abusing me, and I was being too busy being abused to work on her game, which the way that she put it, I don't even, I can't, I literally can't even, so I'm just going to keep moving on. But so the reason I mentioned that whole situation is because of the enormous asymmetry of the portrayal. You know, Liana saw fit to essentially cast that as a central key item in that cancellation video. Otherwise, she wouldn't have mentioned it. She would have just simply said Asher harassed a trans woman, which incidentally he didn't. It was a disagreement. It was a slap fight between two queer furries, which happens all the fucking time on the internet. And Liana Kirshner essentially turned it into the assassination of Prince Ferdinand. Duke Ferdinand, I'm sorry. I don't know why I said Prince. Maybe that's because I've been listening to Purple Rain all day. Who cares? Where was I? You can tell I've had way too much coffee. And so I said that to both clear the record and establish a fairness in the distribution of responsibilities, which is not Stephen's and it's not Asher's. The responsibility lies on Liana Kirshner and Mouse Marygest. And I have owned all of the share of my responsibility. If you remember, that's why I began my first video with. And I will gladly own the shit that belongs to me, but I will not carry someone else's shit. And Liana Kirshner, up to this point, continuously denies that she's responsible for any shit. Because if you look at the logs, the only delays that she ever admits are administrative delays due to her juggling volunteers that didn't exist at the time because I guess she's a time lady. I don't know. So, with that in mind, if Liana Kirshner feels that she is indeed abused or sees herself as an abused spouse, I am sorry. It is, however, not my business to make that determination or not. It is her business to make that determination, just like it is none of her goddamn business to make that determination for my marriage. Yet, nevertheless, she has done so. Another interesting thing about this exchange, and this all came about because a backer from the game, and full disclosure, I have not had contact with this backer in over a year. And in the very brief contact that we had, it was just a hello over blue sky, and then we didn't interact again. They were not in my friends list. They were not even common acquaintances. And you can see that probably when I put my car file back online. Because I think that gets preserved too. I'm not entirely sure. I believe it does. But this backer inquired to Liana if the breach was true. Now, Liana did a Liana, and by that I mean she is incapable of actually engaging with the substance of an argument, especially if it's something that is disadvantageous to her or will make her look bad. And this is what she does. She will change phrasing. She will shift terms. In fact, she does exactly the same thing that Poppy Diabolique does. If you look at the argument that Asher had with Poppy, Terminology becomes very, very fluid with Leanna Kirshner, who constantly will tell you that words mean things and she has a degree or she has studies in communications and is a journalist and therefore should know how this works. But nevertheless, access becomes appropriation. My complaint was that there was unauthorized access to the funds by Stephen Joel Kirshner, as you saw from that log in February of 2022. That is the center and core of the complaint. Because you see, Liana Kirshner likes to tout the fact that she is transparent, that she has integrity, that she is honest to a fault even when it makes her look bad. Well, this really would have made her look bad. And yet, however, it also would have made sure that everybody knew she was honest as all get out, because she would essentially say, my husband accessed $3,000 of the funds without authorization from me, and the funds will be returned. But she didn't do that. And that is the central complaint. That is the core of the complaint. It is not whether or not the backers got their money back. That is a non-issue. It is not part of the moral and ethical center of the complaint. And don't let Liana make it shift that way, because Liana does this all the time. And now that I've mentioned it, keep an eye out for this, because you're going to notice this all over the place. She rewrites everybody for her own benefit. And the reason that was brought up by me, if you recall, is that Liana, as part of her justification for putting my husband on blast over that nothing burger of a slap fight on Twitter, is that she said that I was apparently angry about the notion that the public behavior of my spouse could affect the public perception of a visible project. I know most of you probably don't know me. I used to co-host a podcast with Liana called the Broken Clock Podcast that centered around the concept of philosophy and ethics, the Stoics, Taoism, and other philosophical foundations. So the notion of ethics is actually very important to me. And my husband and I are very good at seeing interrelations between concretes and abstractions. So when Liana Kirshner made that statement, I saw several elements to that argument, which is essentially, it is the statement that which is a bad behavior of not just the developers, but anyone linked to that developer that could affect the public opinion of a project needs to be disclosed. All right. And that's why I said, let us apply the same principles to her. My husband, Asher, got into a nothing burger slap fight with a trans woman. He called her manipulative because in his eyes, she was employing a lot of manipulative rhetoric. And that is something that you will see in the chat logs. And it's also what her ex-girlfriends call her, who are also trans women, by the way. So no, it wasn't about transphobia. Poppy is just kind of a spiky person. And that's fine. People have disagreements all the fucking time. So, but Liana's argument is that was tied to the game, and so therefore she could not go on because someone had to stop the bleeding, whatever. She actually said that in the cancellation video. But now, let's take that same abstraction, that same principle, and apply it to Liana, which I did. Her husband accessed money he had no right to access, tied to this very public Kickstarter project, and therefore the disclosure of that behavior had to be done from a moral and ethical standpoint. All I did was apply Liana Kirshner's principles to herself. And she doesn't like it one bit. And you got to ask yourself why. And Asher has laid out exactly how this would go on our end. There are no surprises here. Leanna Kirshner has implied that we know that deep down in our soul that we know we're doing wrong. We are not doing anything wrong. From the Taoist and the Stoic perspective, any person who tells a lie incurs a debt. A debt to several things. First of all, a debt to reality because they're trying to falsify reality. A debt to the person that they have told a lie about because that is an injury. It is an ethical injury to that person. It is an injustice. And for the Stoics, the concept of truth was a foundational pillar of the notion of justice. And finally, a debt to themselves. Because any person who tells a lie or who perpetuates a falsehood is profiting from nothing. There is no value to be gained from something predicated on a falsehood. And speaking of that, it's interesting that Liana, who is Miss Transparency, Miss I will not speak in private anymore, because people can easily take screenshots out of context, which is something she has said, to this backer said, essentially, catch me in DMs, I'll give you the deets, when this backer essentially asked her, well, did your husband do this or not? Now, because this is Liana Kirshner, and you can see the pattern on the website, this is, at this point, someone should make a Liana Kirshner bingo card because these things just happen over and over again. But so I'm going to tell you what I think would have happened had this backer gone into the DMs with Liana, because it doesn't seem like she did. But again, I don't know this backer personally, and to keep Liana's wrath from falling on them, I have made my best to not talk to them at all since I saw this thing happening this morning. Just like I have not contacted most of the people in the dossiers that Liana has screwed over. And I've worked with the evidence, copious evidence, on my end because I want to spare them the wrath of Hurricane Liana. But what I can tell you is that if this person had gone into DMs with Liana would have done probably the same thing that she has done to other people, including myself. Because you see, I told you, well, I briefly talked about the woman Liana allegedly verbally abused at PAX and then tried to gaslight. Well, she had a brother, and this brother started speaking up, reaching out to me about the abuse that he saw his sister undergo. And one of the people that apparently he had talked to was Kim Crawley. I don't know Kim Crawley, by the way. I know she's a cybersecurity expert, but that's all I know about her. When I mentioned this, Liana immediately pivoted and said, well, you should tell him that Kim Crawley is a domestic abuser, by the way. She stabbed her husband in the leg, and that is documented. Now, at the time, I was busy with other things, like trying to keep my dear friends from getting sued by Liana, but we'll talk about that later. So I never really followed up on that documented thing. What I've discovered is that there is no documentation, none that I can find about that incident at all. Of course, if any of you do have that, please point me to it, and I will amend the record. But as of this point, I have not found a single evidence to that effect. But it's very much geared towards discrediting people. She did it to Gail Simone too. When Liana and Gail Simone got into the tiff, which I'll talk about that because Liana has portrayed Gail Simone in a very unfair way. She said to me that Gail Simone was struggling with mental illness, that she had a congenital problem because her mother was also deeply mentally ill. It's interesting that she says that, isn't it? But you shouldn't be surprised. She says that of her sister-in-law, that her sister-in-law is profoundly mentally ill and thinks her child is endangered. She's also done it to Emily Schooley too. When and by the way, let's do away with this nonsense of Stalker Chan, as she calls it, and she uses that stupid voice. And I'm sorry, Leanna, it is a stupid voice. Quit doing that. I swear, it sounds like you're a goddamn 12-year-old girl. It is a grotesque mockery of a serious issue, by the way. And all of that mocking that you do of people, you don't see yourself. You look exactly like Trump. And honestly, I'm going to make a disclosure here. I had never looked at Leanna's content. Outside of Lady Bits and A Gamer's Guide to Feminism and then Boss Fight, I'd never looked at Leanna's online content before because I like looking at people who present their work with some level of preparation, like Katerina Zebrovna or Caitlin Dowdy, people who put forth research and are not just spouting things at a camera. Because if you want me to look at you for 45 minutes spouting just off the cuff stuff at the camera, you should at least have the wit of a Groucho Marx, and that's not Leanna. But it wasn't until this, the sparkle fucking, as you might call it, that I started watching Leanna's content, because then I started getting whiffs that she was talking about us. Because again, when Asher was crying because Leanna made fun of his father's suicide, 1 week later, and I told her that that's what's happening. A week later, she made a video called Male Tears, describing that situation. But we'll go into that later. I'm sounding like the never ending story, I know. But the point is that if I had seen Leanna's weekly content, I wouldn't have become friends with her. Because what comes through is ugly. It is ugly and poisonous and bitter and demeaning. And there is an enduring disdain of the mentally ill. And you can see that right through in her portrayal of people like Emily Schooley. To illustrate the point, allow me to read something that Leanna said to her server about Emily Schooley. And we're going to cut the bullshit because this whole stalker chant thing, as I was starting to say, we know it's Emily Schooley. I will swear on a stack of Bibles that is Emily Schooley because I have the chat logs where Leanna identifies Emily Schooley as her stalker and Stalker Chan and other things. So does Asher. And what this proves is that Leanna Kirsner does not in fact anonymize the people that she rags on her radio show and her YouTube channel. All she does is change the name for a moniker. But here's the thing. Anonymization does not work if a large number of your audience knows exactly who you're talking to. That's not anonymity, that's just code switching. And a vast majority of the people involved with Leanna Kirsner knows whom she refers to when she says Stalker Chan. Just like a lot of them know who she refers to when referring to us as the gruesome twosome. And it's all this game of, I'm not talking about you while talking about you thing, which is, we stopped doing that in high school, people. Cut it out. But the thing she says about Emily Schooley, for example, she will immediately say that Emily Schooley has a histrionic personality disorder, which is interesting because it's not a diagnosis that people readily admit to. In fact, there is a lower threshold of people who admit to having histrionic personality disorder than people willing to admit they have borderline personality disorder. The level of stigma is that high for that disorder. So how exactly Leanna Kirsner knows that Emily Schooley suffers from histrionic personality disorder is a story that really merits looking into. Because how does she know? because I find it very unlikely that Emily Scully would have confided in her. So, unless she's making shit up, which could also happen because I've already shown you she makes shit up all the time. But let me show you how Liana Cursor referred to Emily Scully in her Discord server. And I'm going to do a dramatic rendition of it for your pleasure, or displeasure, as it may be.
It's part of her illness. She's got histrionic personality disorder. She can't get any attention herself, so she shamelessly calls attention to herself, then milks more attention claiming she's been falsely accused. I tried to put her on camera once. The weird, orgasmic, insane look in her eyes the minute she knew the camera was on her made the segment so creepy we couldn't use it. It was supposed to be funny. It wasn't funny. She hasn't gotten anywhere based on any talent. She spun a sob story about being abused by her ex and got some stuff made based on that, but she's the one that exploits contacts. Everything she accuses me of is a confession of something she's done. For the record, I pitched It's Not Therapy on my own to both Saga 960 and Sirius XM.
Over the top version aside, I did that so you could focus on not just how over the top ridiculous Liana's description is, but also how grotesque. Again, she is describing someone who is allegedly mentally ill, who has some sort of disorder or another. And I mean, this is just vulgar and grotesque. It's like Harry Stephen Keeler and Amanda McKittrick Ross had decided to sit down and write a character assassination piece on someone. And I gotta ask, if this is indeed someone who suffers from a mental illness, as Liana has claimed multiple times, how is her portrayal not a gross mockery of serious issues? Is it okay because Liana's doing it? It's just having fun with it? Why don't we ask the target how fun she thinks this is? Right? But the reason Liana Kirchner does these things, and the reason why I think that that will be her next tangent, now that she's going to start slipping into people's DMs who have a complaint about the $3,000, is this. Liana Kirchner is very aware of an issue that mentally ill people face every day. And it's part and parcel of stigma. And it is the issue of discrediting. Mentally ill people, in the eyes of our society, have less credibility than most people around them because of the perception that in one way or another, they are not connected to reality, and therefore, their opinions and their issues can be easily dismissed. Now, that is the proper definition of stigma, not the bullshit that Liana Kirchner spent 30 minutes not defining in her episode about stigma. So take that definition and look at what Liana Kirchner does. Look at what she says about Emily Scully. Look what she says about Kim Crawley or Gail Simone. And those are not the only examples. When she got her ass kicked out of the game because she wasn't a team player, by that point, she had already tried to build up a case that both the dev and his wife were deeply, profoundly mentally ill. Again, one of her favorite phrases, and they were both profoundly unmanaged mentally ill. Why bring that up? Well, it's the same reason that she rephrases your objections to be something other than the phrasing you used, and therefore slink off into a different tangent. Because tapping into that societal stigma, discrediting someone because they're, quote, insane, means you don't have to take them seriously, right? What silly people. Like, for example, let me give you an example. In her streak of nonsense on Blue Sky, she said that one of the things that we complain about is that quote, they blame me for their marriage, but they're a gay couple and I live in another country. Well, I mean, yes, if you state it like that, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, what silly gays? But first of all, Liana Kirsner, we're not living in 1995, okay? This is 2026. The internet exists. I don't know if anyone's informed you of that, just like nobody's informed you that furries aren't disgusting. And that framing erases the fact that for 6 years, all three of us talked constantly over the internet. That's why I have 80 pages of Telegram chats with you. And we both complained about our husbands. And we both reinforced some of the worst parts about us as far as avoidant personalities can be, insofar as conflict with the people we love the most. When you restore that context, suddenly, first of all, that accusation doesn't match the reality because I didn't blame you for our problems. I basically, you stripped that nuance because I essentially said that we reinforced our problems instead of having a more adaptive approach. And I followed your advice at my own peril and my poor judgment. Those are things I said in the first video, and you can go back and look and see that that is exactly what I said, that you did not force me to follow your advice. I did that willingly and to my bad judgment. That's me taking responsibility for accepting bad advice. But it's like you have to center yourself in everything, isn't it? But back to the stigma, again, if Asher is just a silly little borderline who can't be taken seriously, he's so delusional, and therefore, by extension, his husband, who is mentally ill adjacent and is not chastising him or condemning him, and is not doing the thing you want me to do, which is essentially control him so he stops being inconvenient to you, well, then I am just enabling bad and horrible behavior, and I'm a terrible person. So my complaints can be discounted. And it all comes back down to a symmetry, right? Because if we look at that cancellation video and the way that you framed it all, even though I have now established that both our households were in turmoil with mental health crises for both of our spouses, which spouse got thrown under the bus and which one got a free ticket? The mentally ill spouse is the one who got thrown under the bus. And I think that the pattern of behavior that can be easily observed in Liana Kirshner's tactics about how she always brings up someone's mental health, their diagnosis, and their personal life, well, that really does tell you everything, doesn't it? Here we have a peer counselor whom, if you were to look at her actions, actually does appear to have a seething contempt for the mentally ill, the people she allegedly is trying to protect. And that's one of the reasons we say she's unsafe. She has essentially tried to reframe the argument, too, that we think she's not a good fit for a counselor because she didn't handle Asher's borderline correctly, even though he was not a client. That's what she said. No, that is not our argument at all. And you will see that if you read the logs and all the information on the website. Because the clients that she has had issues with have been treated just like she treated Asher. With the disclosure, Miss, I don't discuss third parties. And thank goodness the backer called her out on that. Because what the hell have the last 18 months been, if not Liana Kirshner talking about third parties? And so we come now to the, I think, the cherry on the cake, which is Liana Kirshner saying that she is now seeking legal counsel, which makes me go, well, where did Mark Berry go? Right? But if this is the path that she wants to take, we're fine with it. Because as we stated before, neither of us have done anything wrong. There is nothing wrong with setting the record straight when someone has lied. And Asher published all of his Telegram conversations for one simple reason. In this episode, Liana Kirshner essentially accused Asher of being abusive to her throughout their entire friendship. Here's the footage.
People will hound you to the ends of the earth sometimes, but it's still a choice. And, the fact that I still believe that being harassed by these people is better than having to deal with them, daily or weekly, says a lot about how bad the daily or weekly treatment was, right? So
there it is, right out there in the open. From the context of the episode, it's very easy to see it's Asher she's talking about. So, what is Asher to do? What is someone who has already been discredited because he is mentally ill to do in front of that accusation? Because if he were to just deny it, well, that would be seen as proof of guilt, because that's the double bind Kirshner always puts people in. The only way that Asher can prove his innocence is essentially by publishing the entire logs of all of his conversations with Liana Kirshner so people could see that what she claims is there is not. And I want you to understand how deeply unfair that is for a vulnerable individual to have to expose himself to public scrutiny in that manner. Because it's either do that or let the accusation hang over his head for the rest of his days. Because a woman accused him of being abusive, and that is a weapon Liana Kirshner wields. Liana Kirshner wields toxic femininity like a weapon. And it's time people started realizing that. So Asher took the only course that he had. And Liana Kirshner bears all of the moral responsibility for whatever comes from that. Asher does not bear any responsibility. It is Liana Kirshner who has incurred the debt of the liar, which is why I revealed what I revealed about Stephen, because she lied about the situations surrounding the delays of Song of Sparkle Muffin. Back in October, I said that for every lie she would give, I would reveal the truth. She has implied that two wrongs don't make a right. There are no two wrongs here. There is only one wrong, her lying. We will never, ever be held as having made a wrong by speaking the truth, especially to a liar. So if Liana Kirshner wants to threaten us again with a legal action, she's more than welcome to do so, and I welcome the opportunity then, because discovery is a thing. We have nothing to hide, and I will provide all of my files so that forensic experts can verify their authenticity. And should it come to that, I do know, or it is my understanding, that Canadian banks do keep their financial records of up to 5 years. So that's another thing, too. But yeah, so another day, another set of nonsense by Liana Kirshner. None of this was necessary. Over the last 18 months, she's had countless opportunities to do the right thing and set the record straight. Instead, she has chosen to do the opposite. And that is why we are where we are right now. Even as of yesterday, she could have simply said, yes, I did not portray the events surrounding the delays accurately, and I did not tell the truth. The truth is that we both faced similar issues at home, and we both faced significant delays because of them. That's it. But the problem with that, with the truth, the nuanced truth, is that she doesn't come across as a victim. She doesn't come across as the hero, with the rest of us being villains. You know, the children story. She can't mine goodwill out of that, only accountability. I wished that someone in her life would realize and point out that in the long term, not being perfect, but having the reputation of being someone who will actually own your flaws and then working on them is a much better thing because that's real. It's not an image, it's not a statue. I did tell you to watch because things are going to get wild with the accusations. Well, just like clockwork, they started, so who knows what tomorrow will bring in the Theatre de Kerner. But I guess it's time to grab your popcorn. Until then, I am Mary Gist, and I hope you have a good day.